Today on Listen Up, we remember from Flanders Fields to the desert front lines of Afghanistan. The face of Canada's veteran is changing. How do we honor their sacrifice? That's next. Welcome to Listen Up. I'm Lorna Duick. On the 11th day of the 11th hour of the 11th month, Canadians pause in memory of the countless men and women who have sacrificed their lives in military service. It's been a solemn tradition for more than 90 years. And while the names and wars and conflicts have changed, the essence of sacrifice remains the same. So today we're acknowledging that sacrifice, and we've asked our reporter Ricky Ratliff to be our point person on this show for us. And Ricky, you're going to take us out to the field today on this very important issue of remembrance. But I remember when this all began for you, because for a couple of years now you've been helping us cover the Veterans Beat. Tell us when the windows opened and you said this is just a different Remembrance Day experience for Canadians.
There was a phenomenon that was taking place across Canada, and it's called the Highway of Heroes. And what had happened is that there was a 172-kilometer stretch where Canadians would gather at over 50 overpasses to welcome home the repatriation of the fallen soldiers returning from Afghanistan. And it just moved me to the core.
It was a very emotional experience for you and the camera team. I remember that.
It was.
What did you see that so moved you?
I saw hundreds of Canadians, soldiers, firemen, police officers, standing on guard at every overpass with a maple leaf flag. And it moved me as an American, because I'm coming here to this country and I have this presumption that Canadians tend to not be very patriotic. But what I saw was love for fellow man and respect for fallen soldiers, and I'll never forget it.
And now that has helped shape how we've wrestled through this Remembrance Day as a team. And so we've asked you to get out to the field and bring us back 3 unique perspectives on Remembrance Day for today's veterans. Tell us about the first story we're going to see.
Well, we're going to hear and see about the physical, emotional, and spiritual wounds that our soldiers and our families are facing as they return from Afghanistan. There are over 150 Canadian soldiers that have died, but there are many that are returning that are living, but they will return with scars that are both visible and invisible. And so in our first report, we're actually going to hear from one of Canada's most vocal and unapologetic advocates for veteran care in this country. He's a captain in the Canadian Forces, but he's also the founder of Wounded Warriors. And he says, and he predicts, that over 30% of returning soldiers from Afghanistan will return with emotional scars. And that's something that we need to be prepared for as a country to face and deal with. He also says in a really moving piece for the Toronto Star that we have established what a pair of legs is worth, but what about a person's soul?
It's a great question base that we're going to head forward with what you've done. Let's go to your first report right now.
Be assured, WoundedWarriors.ca and the CAW.
Wayne Johnston doesn't shy away from the press, especially when it comes to the needs of Canada's veterans. His 37-year military career has taken him around the world. But for now, he's stationed at the Colonel R.S. McLaughlin Armory in Oshawa, Ontario. On this Remembrance Day, soldiers will gather at this historical memorial to honor those who have died in battle. Every year, as part of the ceremonies, the names of over 500 fallen soldiers belonging to the Ontario Regiment are read aloud. It's a somber process, and one that takes time.
When I first came here to this unit, I thought, that's odd. And then after I went, that's the least we owe them, that one day of the year.
As a progress report, or as a report card on the nation, how are we doing in our care for our veterans?
As we know, there's a lot of issues out there. It's a bubbling pot at the moment. But what I'm really heartened with is the fact that when was the last time affairs of veterans were really on the national front? It's almost, if we held an election tomorrow, I'd suggest it would be an election issue.
To date, over 25,000 members of the Canadian Forces have served in Afghanistan. More than 500 of those have returned with injuries, many of them severe. But Wayne says it's the wounds we can't see he's most concerned about.
when young men and women go to war, they see many things that they wouldn't normally see here in Canada. And it does take a toll on the mind, you know, say if you're in a vehicle and somebody's killed in that same vehicle, or your best friend gets wounded.
And these invisible wounds, are they hard to recognize when these soldiers return home? They look physically fine on the outside, but are they hard to recognize the injuries on the inside?
Most certainly they are, and it's really often, you know, OSIs, operational stress injuries, can take 5 minutes, 5 months, 5 years, 15 years to manifest. And I think the biggest challenge is within ourselves, the soldiers within ourselves, to say, I need help.
Now, Wayne, you know the needs of operational stress injury firsthand. Can you tell us about that?
Certainly. For the past 2 years, I was the repatriation officer bringing the fallen home, and it's a difficult job. It's difficult to balance being the efficient staff officer and being a compassionate person, and perhaps I failed there, but you know, I think I became more of a compassionate person. And when you're dealing with death and dying and the tragedy surrounding death, it takes a toll on you.
And what toll has it taken on you?
Suffice to say, I'm not the person I was when I started. Having said that, it's the best job I ever did in the Canadian Forces.
And while Wayne takes the time to heal, he's taken a less stressful role at this unit on a return to work program. But he stays busiest advocating for veterans and his charity work. Seeing cracks in the government system of care for wounded veterans, he felt compelled to help fill in those gaps. And in 2006, Wounded Warriors was born, partnering with various organizations across the country, including Veterans Affairs. Their programs have helped cushion the blows of trauma that war can bring, giving war amputees a second chance at mobility. One of their pilot projects takes a more unconventional approach to addressing some of the needs that come with a psychological injury. It's believed that about 7% of soldiers who deploy will develop post-traumatic stress disorder. Another 4.5% will develop anxiety, and another 13% will develop depression. So how does FIDO fit in?
2005, I was diagnosed with PTSD, and been undergoing various forms of treatment, from medication to hypnosis, a little bit of everything. Schnitzel here has, well, she's a great stress reliever for me.
I see Schnitzel as his passport to the world. The ability that she has to go places that a large dog can't go will provide him the opportunity to experience things that he would otherwise be unable to do so.
Unconventional support is what it's going to take to care for today's veterans, Wayne says, because what worked for our World War I and II veterans doesn't necessarily work for our veterans of today. Wayne, why is it our public responsibility to care for these young veterans?
I think when a nation sends young men and women to war, we need to do it judiciously. And I get it. People die, and we need to, you know, those lives need to be spent judiciously, because it's not just somebody's life. It's a mother who has to raise a child by themselves, a mother who will never see grandchildren, a father who will never walk his daughter down the aisle. But I think soldiers know when they go overseas that it's dangerous. They accept that. But there's a moral contract with the nation. And the moral contract is, if we get hurt, be it physically or mentally, we need to be looked after. And that's the moral contract.
When we return, we get an inside look at one soldier's sacrifice next.